Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. The following message that you are going to be listening to, it comes from an email that was sent to us by one of our admins. I'm so glad that our program is able to touch many lives. There is an email that I want to share with you. Strange things do happen in this world. The email reads like this. Hello, my brother, how are you? Can you please post my own story as hidden identity? Well, my brother, my story, it goes on like this. When I was still young, this was after my husband had died and I was still mourning for my husband. It then happened that in our church, there was this other big American charismatic pastor who came for this big awakening. They called that crusade the Big Awakening. It happened a long time ago. This was in the early 2000s. That was when this crusade happened. So after that crusade, I was then approached by this other young man. He was not even a pastor at that time. This young man then told me that during the crusade, there were some scouts that were from America, and these scouts, they were looking for men that had potential to become powerful pastors, and he was amongst the selected few. But the problem that he was facing was that he was supposed to be given this sponsorship to go and study in America. But this sponsorship, it had some conditions, and the conditions was that he was supposed to find a partner. And I said, okay, you want a partner? Well, I do not have any young sisters that are not already married, and my daughter, as you can see, she's still young. At that time, my daughter, she was still only 8 years old. I said, so I don't know how you want me to help you. Then this guy said that he had been given a mission by God. God had revealed himself to him, and the mission that he had been given was quite bigger than the mission that our pastor, who was still alive at that time, had been given by God. So he said that he could no longer serve under his leadership because he wanted to do his own. He wanted to start his own ministry. During that big awakening crusade, I was the one who was leading the crusade, and I used to play a tambourine. Even right now, I still play it, but now it is a lot of electronic stuff that is filled up in church, so there is no more space for tambourines and stuff like that. But back in those days, a tambourine was a very special equipment during the praise and worship. He said that he liked the way that I had led my team throughout the prayer services and when we were leading people into prayer, and he wanted me on my team. So I said that is fine, and at that time he had not revealed himself totally to me that he wanted me to become his wife because I was older than him. Currently, my brother, I am a woman who is aged 68, and this husband of mine, he is only aged 59. So we are years apart. So there was no way that I would have ever suspected that this young man, he was actually wanting to make me to become his partner so that he can get that sponsorship. And I was still mourning for my husband who had recently passed away. And that is another reason as to why they chose me. It was because I was still mourning for my husband, because my husband, he had died. This was like 3 months prior to this big crusade. So they had actually targeted me so that when they will be doing their rituals for my current husband, then they can summon the dark powers, the evil powers that they ended up summoning. Well, my brother, before this had actually happened, this guy then said that he was walking away out of the church. He then promised me a good monthly package. As a widower, I then saw that with all the responsibility that I now had, my husband's pension money that he had left behind, it was not going to get me far. I needed to do something about it. I then started working for him. It was a painful decision for me to leave the church that I had started attending, the church where I had met my late husband. But anyway, I needed money. I then started working for this young man, and through him I saw the power of God, because he would actually just touch someone's head, then the person will start to manifest. Some of them, they would roll on the ground all over the villages where we would go to pray for people, and they would manifest, and he would cast out demons, serpents that were possessing the villagers' bodies. It then happened that we went for this other small crusade when he wanted us to establish this other church in this other village where he had performed a lot of miracles. Well, what we will do is that after the service, the crusade, we will then return to the city, because the village was not very far from the closest town. So we would go and sleep at this beautiful hotel. It was me and the rest of our crusade team. One night, after having dinner, he then said that the rest of the crusade team, they can actually go and rest in their separate rooms. He then told me that I should stay behind because he wanted to discuss business with me. Well, I stayed behind with the man of God, and I asked him what kind of business he wanted us to discuss. He told me that the guys in America, the ones that wanted to give him a sponsorship, at that time he kept on saying that the guys, but later on I then found out that these were your Freemasons that wanted to give him this sponsorship. So these guys, they had given him the condition that he could only be allowed into the program if only he was going to find a partner that was mature, that was older than he was. And when you would be married to this partner, then we were not supposed to be like husband and wife in bed, and we were only supposed to be married so that people can have that outwards appearance of me being married to him, but never sharing the bed. And this was like the secret that he had to keep throughout his ministry, so that he can keep on being given the money and all the donations and whatnot. And then there were some things that he was supposed to do, like never sleeping with a woman again, but rather sleeping with the same sex. So my brother, at that time, he revealed all of these facts to me one by one. He revealed them to me. On that night, he told me that it was time for him to travel to America, and I had to do this for him. I said, but what are people going to say? Because I am way older than you. You are just a young man, and I have kids already. What are we going to do? Then he said that he didn't care about my kids or whatnot. All that he wanted was a partner, so that this sponsorship, the opportunity, will not slip out of his hands. I agreed, my brother, under the condition that we were going to cancel that marriage as soon as he had returned back from America. But little did I know that I was actually the important piece to the puzzle. I was going to be used as well for the rituals, so that he can be given the full sponsorship. The first time around when he went there, they wanted to initiate him, but the second time around I was supposed to be hanging around him when the initiation will be finished. Well, he went alone to America. After he had gone to America alone, he then did whatever the initiation process. And when he returned, my brother, he then gave me money. At that time, he had $18,000 on him, cash. He then gave me, and he said that this money, I want you to keep it. I said, what are we going to use this money for? He then said that we are going to give your people this money, because during the initiation ceremony, he was told that tradition is quite important, and one has to follow tradition so that the marriage can be recognized both on heaven and on earth, just like what they do in their own culture. They do not pay the bride price, but they make sure that the man buys the gift in form of a ring that is very expensive, and that is their own culture that us as black people, we just follow, even though we do not properly understand it. So they told my so-called husband to pay up the bride price and to make my own people to be happy, so that I can be spiritually tied to him. Since we had just done a court wedding, they said that I was not spiritually tied to him, because in the spirit our marriage was not recognized, because his people had not met with my people. Well, we then went back to the village, and no one even expected that I was going to get remarried so quickly. And when they saw the so-called husband that was going to marry me, I saw people that they were just looking at each other because he was just a young man. At that time, he didn't yet have this big body that he has right now, because right now, when we are standing close to each other, you can think that we are the same age, but during those days, he was still thin and skinny when he was accepted into that sponsorship. Well, my brother, he paid up for the bride price, and I told myself that if I was going to make an income out of this, then I was not going to be ashamed of what people in the village were going to say. I didn't even know what it even meant for someone to be a Freemason. I just thought that maybe it was just a club there of white men that were going to sponsor my so-called husband. On the return trip, we were supposed to go together. When we went back together, that was when I saw hell on earth. My husband, my so-called husband, he was humiliated in front of me. We arrived at this other place where we were told that it was a certain type of a lodge whereby even the wives to the Freemasons, they were allowed. So we stayed there. It was a quiet place, and all around the area, you could just see those big trees and all around the area, you could just see the big trees. No anything else. It was just a forest. It was a beautiful place, but it was deep in the jungle. So my husband, he would be constantly be humiliated, and there was a golfing area where a lot of older white men would come to play their golf. So my husband, he was made to undress, and after undressing, he had to carry, those golf equipment around as those guys would be busy playing their golf. And that was part of the initiation ceremony. The final day when my husband was initiated, that was when I was brought into this other room where there were a lot of men. All of those men, I could not recognize them. I could only recognize these men by looking at their manhood. You could see that this one with his manhood that he has pulled out, this one is a white man, this one is a black man. That is how I recognized those men. I was then told that there was an energy transfer that was supposed to be done, and this energy transfer, it was supposed to be done very quickly, since I was going through that grieving period when I was grieving for my own husband. So they wanted to sleep with me, and after sleeping with me, they were going to sleep with my husband. And the terror that got into my body when they told me that they wanted to sleep with me first, and after that they were going to transfer that energy that they would have taken from my body, transferring it into my husband's body. It was quite a terrifying thing. These men, they were 12, and these men, they said that them being 12, they were actually representing the disciples of Jesus, and me being the 13th, I was more like the Judas Iscariot who was later replaced. Everything that they were doing, it was as if we were holding a biblical religious ceremony. They slept with me whilst I was on top of this other very cold rock that was more like an altar, like the ones that they used to use in the old covenant. Then after sleeping with me, my husband was made to kneel on top of that rock as well. Then they started sleeping with him one by one. Then after sleeping with me one by one, they then started sleeping with my husband. And after that, those men, they went and they left us in that big room that looked more like a cathedral, and they told us that we were supposed to sleep in that old room throughout the night. Throughout the night, my husband, he kept on like groaning in agony, and when I would ask him what is going on, he kept on saying that he felt as if there were things that were crawling into his body. And he told me not to worry, because he had been taught that this was going to happen. That spiritual transfer had actually happened, and it was taking place. Then me and my husband, we then returned back to our country. That was when his ministry blew. His ministry blew so much that they ended up telling him to slow it down. Otherwise, if it was going to get too bad, his ministry got so big that he even wanted to extend it to several African countries. That was when they came and they had a meeting with my husband. Some of those handlers that are my husband's handlers, they told him that it was time for him to scale it down. We scaled our church down to just a few branches when we used to have thousands and thousands of people. They told him that the more that he was getting bigger, the more that people were going to notice him, and they always want to play it safe in the shadows. Some of the things that he gives to them, I do not even know. He said that he is not allowed to discuss some of those things with his wife. Me and him, we have never shared the same bed because it is not even allowed. Whenever he wants to have intercourse, like I said, he goes after the same sex. He seduces a lot of them, and they think that he's actually like them, but he's not. He loves women, but he's forbidden to touch a woman. I have been living in this hellhole for all my life. As for my kids, they have been offered the best opportunity in life, the best universities that you can think of. But as for me, I am going through hell each and every day. I just say, when is it all going to end? When is the end going to come? And I know that there is no end that is going to come, because if I try to end it, then my kids, they are going to suffer. Because as far as I know, even if this husband of mine, he tries to hide that fact from me, my kids, they already have their own handlers. That is why they were taken to those best universities. Yeah, dear listeners, right there was a message that was sent to me by one of our listeners as an email. It was forwarded to me by our admin. Then she said that it is just a sad fact that I can't share with you all the details, otherwise you are going to be censored. I could have shared with you a lot of details. Strange things do happen in this world.